Welcome to Life, bringing you insight and experiences into love, relationships, and fertility with a focus on enjoying life and moving forward. On today's podcast, we'll be speaking with Fay Johnson about raising her two children, both born through surrogacy. Welcome to Life, love, insight, fertility, experiences. Today we'll be speaking with Fay Johnson about her experiences in attempting to conceive, deciding on surrogacy, raising her children, and working in surrogacy since their birth. Fay will provide significant insight on the topic for everyone listening, especially for intended parents considering this option. Fay, those I work with have so many questions finding the right surrogate, the lifelong journey of telling your children, parental bonding, especially if it's a donor egg. And this list goes on, as I'm sure you know. So thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story. And I know we have so much to talk about that I'm not sure where to begin.
Oh, you're so welcome, Lori. It's really a pleasure for me to be here. Basically, starting for me, I'm a DES baby, which was a drug that was invented in the mid 40s to help prevent morning sickness and miscarriage. And it was probably being tested on people like my mother in Boston, where it was tested at the time. So I was one of the front runners, in the early, because I'm one of the test babies. So
Yes, and
I
there's
did,
more than people would recognize. It was a large number of women that were
yeah.
given that drug and that couldn't deliver. They would miscarry if they became
Well, our
pregnant.
uteruses didn't work. So
Yeah,
you could go through all the fertility treatments, as did I, and everything tested out fine. It compartmentalized it, but it just didn't work.
right.
So I did two IVFs when they first invented it, or when it first started here in the mid 80s, and it
So that was a
didn't
while
work.
ago.
Yeah, it didn't work, but and there was not an internet then. But for me, my late husband, who was an attorney, came home one day and said, I made the darndest wrong number phone call today. And I said, what? And he shared that he had made a phone call on a law case, but had by mistake ended up with the founder of our agency, Bill Handel, who founded the Center for Surrogate Parenting in 1980.
Oh my goodness, that gives me the
And
chills when you say that.
oh, it was just extraordinary. And I was like, woohoo, my lucky day. So we were at his office a week later. And I will tell you, ironically, the other woman, Karen, who has been the co-owner of this agency all these years, we both saw Bill on a 60 Minutes show in 1980. She was 17 in South
Wow.
Africa, and I was a woman in California who was realizing something wasn't working right. But all those years later, there was Bill. And so we met with them, my husband and
Was
I.
surrogacy ever even an option in your mind?
When I heard Bill on that show, I think you intuitively file things in your brain,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that I may need that someday. I think something isn't going right.
Wow.
So I totally did, and I remembered it. And Karen can recall her parents wanting to change the channel, and her at the time saying, no, 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 I want to be an attorney someday, but I want to be the one that wrote the book, not the one where you just go to the book.
Oh my goodness.
So I think sometimes people travel through many lives and connect at certain points, and I think
Yeah.
that certainly
And we
happened
kind of
here.
unconsciously tune into things that we might want to file
Yeah,
away, as you put so well.
yeah. So we decided, for me, I was so thrilled that I had found an agency, because there was no yellow pages listing. The internet didn't exist yet. And luckily for me and Bob, my late husband, we ended up in the exact best place on the planet to do surrogacy by mistake.
It's
So,
unbelievable, right? If you
uh-huh.
believe in
And
things being meant to be.
it's true. And so we were matched with a surrogate who was the first surrogate we were matched with was named Natalie. And our chief psychologist is a very incredible woman called Dr. Hilary Hannafin, who does all the matching for our clients. And she is taking into consideration your personality, your style, of what kind of relationship you're hoping to have, what your key issues are medically, meaning how many embryos do you have, Is it your egg or is it a donor egg? What would you do in the event of, meaning if you were to learn that the child would not have a quality of life during the pregnancy, what would you do? Would you terminate or would you not? And we have it both
So this
ways.
is extensive. In the 80s when you went, they were doing extensive psychological kind of assessments to make
Oh,
sure that
still,
people would
still
match the
do.
surrogate and the surrogate would
Hmm.
match. And you still do that. And it must have been something so remarkable to find this agency, because I'm thinking, how did people find them at all without the internet? Like, was it word of mouth? And even today, people searching for this option, finding a qualified agency where you feel safe and protected and the surrogate does is
Hmm.
very important, because we were
It's an
chatting.
unregulated field. It's an unregulated field. So do your homework. But one of the things that I used to do when I would appear on television shows occasionally would be particularly in a foreign country. I would look at the camera at the end and just say to the audience, there is nothing remarkable about me except my passion to become a mother. And if I could do it, you can do it. And I
Oh,
would have people find me, you
hmm,
know, do it. It's something they saw on TV, and that was
yeah,
what it took to just say to somebody, you can do this. If your
right,
passion is there, you can do this.
right. Passion and perseverance.
Yeah.
Those two things, I think, and just this, desire.
And I think also
So,
a priority. For example, a priority for me was not that I physically be able to carry a pregnancy and give birth. That would have
yes.
been great, but it wasn't in my story. It wasn't going to
Yeah,
be
it
in
wasn't
my
in your
story.
story, but it's part of the journey to have to accept. So you had
Mhm.
a very specific known reason once you
Mhm.
realized that it was because of this drug that your uterus couldn't carry a
Mhm.
child. Was there some kind of a process that went on in your mind
Oh, of
just to
course,
deal
because
with the fact that, well, I'm not going to carry the child, but we could use my husband's sperm?
yeah. Well, the other part is I think um, emotional energy is key in this whole process of life. But
Right.
when you run into difficulties, I mean, for me, I look at what's going on in the world today, and I see women who would take their children across 1,000-mile trek to better their lives. That is emotional energy
Mm-hmm.
beyond anything I could ever fathom.
Yeah.
And but it's emotional energy regardless of what the subject is. But it's emotional energy to say I am not going to accept where I am because nobody cares but you. Nobody cares that your life goals aren't being met but you. It's the emotional energy to have to say, okay, every day I need to do something to get me toward the goal of
Right, and,
becoming a
and the
mother.
goal can change. So, in
Of
other words,
course.
we could look at becoming a parent in many different ways. So, the path of surrogacy is a unique path, just like donor egg is, or just like donor
Absolutely.
sperm or adoption. So, it's a unique path. And I think you had mentioned to me there was a reason why you wanted to go for surrogacy and not a different path.
I chose surrogacy because I really, I really felt that my husband he was the only son. He was going to carry on the family name, and he wasn't infertile. His
Yeah.
family didn't need to end there. I was the one with the physical issue, and I felt it was only fair to him and his family that I try to at least have him be the genetic connector. And I
So,
will totally acknowledge that back then, my in laws thought I was crazy. They thought I was from Mars
they did.
with this issue. And I said to them in the beginning, it's not going to make any difference to my family, but your family I'm going to bring home the bacon here. You're going to end up with genetic grandchildren
Right.
because
So
I'm crazy.
part of that, when you say that, I like think of all these women that I work with, and the genetic link is so significant to them, because I always talk about the bonding and the parenting being the relationship that's developed, not necessarily the genetics of that child. I talk about nurturing and caring and relationship building. So the genetics is one piece of that. But I had the opportunity to talk to your son, and there's no doubt that you are his mother, regardless of any genetic link. I mean, he's crazy about you. You have similar personalities even. So I have to say that on one hand, I agree, but on the other hand, do you think in any way that they're not as much your children?
Oh, hell no. I think they're more my children because of what I went through. I
Yeah.
could do stand-up comedy about this, seriously. I would have one of those telephone company belts,
Yeah.
with the powder and the diapers and the wipes, and I could do stand-up comedy about this issue. And just sort of
You were
say,
so ready.
The Pope is coming for the rest of you folks because they're going to say, you had this child after having sex? Well, I don't think we're going to allow that. I mean, it's just the flip. We didn't have it happen that way. We had to make it happen another way.
Right. And that came from what you were calling emotional energy.
Yes.
And I always say that the core of every single fertility journey is optimism. And people
Yes.
sometimes don't feel the optimism, but if it's not there, you take another path. And so you did this. You had 2 children, right? And you said the first surrogate. So there was a second surrogate?
Well, Chase was from my second journey.
Uh-huh.
My first journey was a woman named Natalie, and I have a lovely, incredible daughter named Lily, who has grown up to be an occupational therapist. And
she's in her 20s now.
she turned 30 2 weekends ago.
Oh, happy birthday
26.
to her.
Thank you. But they're very different personalities. And Chase was from my second journey, and Lily and I are not at all the similar personality that Chase and I are.
Uh-huh.
Just that was a different donor, but she was my dream come true.
Oh.
And always, both of them will always be that. But I honestly felt, I think, a greater responsibility as a mother because I brought them in.
Yes.
I brought them in my 40s. They didn't have a choice as if any child has a choice. But I worked very hard to have those children. So I took an even greater responsibility when one of them would walk in and say, I think I'll be an aardvark farmer later. And they were 3, I couldn't say, oh, no one in our family is an aardvark farmer. Don't be ridiculous. I had to say, well, tell me all about it.
Uh-huh.
I wanted to have my mind open to whomever these 2 spirits were.
Right. And so you find with your daughter, do you think she's similar to your husband and his personality?
Oh, yes, very much. She was far more similar to my husband.
So I find, and I'm sorry to play like this role here, but I do believe that not every child is alike in personality, regardless of the genetics. And and that some of them are just like their father and some of them are just like their mother. And I mean the parent that raises them, not necessarily the person who's genetically tied. I'm not discounting the genetics, but I believe also
Lily is definitely her father's girl, and it was a terrible tragedy to lose him for everyone, but I think Lily, it was the hardest on. Because she was so close to him, and she's a very much different personality, much more quiet, much more introverted. And, I think I've always laughingly said I couldn't have made Chase more like me if I'd made him myself.
Right.
And poor Lily, I think, took the brunt of that.
Uh-huh.
That we 2 were a lot alike, and the person she was so much alike.
But she, and she grew up to be in a helping profession.
Yep.
Which is very interesting. I've heard her speak. I heard her speak, and she certainly seems very outspoken and very connected to you in how she talks.
I believe that's the truth, and I adore her. I mean, she's just an incredible human being.
Yeah, you do. I've noticed even when I was talking to you beforehand, you give your children the gift of being independent as well as being very connected to you. And so that's why I'm pointing out how connected they actually are to you, because you You so ingrain that they are their own unique people, but you have a
You know,
huge.
I many years ago had to ask myself, what was the greatest gift I was given as from my own mother? What would be the greatest gift if I had to name one? And I realized the greatest gift was the joy that she expressed over the fact that we were her children.
Hmm.
That was the greatest gift. And I thought, wow, that's what it's all about. It's not about are you alike?
Yes.
Because you aren't, whatever. It's the gift of cherishing them because they were what landed in your family.
So
They
let
were
me
your
ask you.
children.
I'm sorry, just to like ask you a couple more questions if you don't mind, only because we only have a certain amount of time. But what was it like raising children? Now, the surrogates were around. It wasn't like they were absent. Your children had the option to meet them.
Mhm.
And how do you tell them this story? How do you tell them that they were in somebody else's tummy?
Oh, I'll tell you, it was very easy for me because I am a rotten liar. I'm a rotten liar. I didn't want to ever have to do that thing about we need to talk. No, I figured out that children are egomaniacs, number one. So I invented a story because they all want to hear the story of the day they were born.
Uh-huh.
So I wrote a story called The Night Before Lily. And
Oh.
I actually fashioned it after another story from my neighbor when her little girl was born prematurely. But
Mm-hmm.
and it was called The Night Before Lily. And I would tell this story to them every single night as I changed a diaper when they were infants. I started when they couldn't talk. I was like Seinfeld, saying, any questions? Oh, good, no questions. It's because you can't talk. Um, but
And to
that
me,
was
that
really,
also gets you used to telling the story to them.
of course, I had to practice my own
Yes.
material. I
Mm-hmm.
told the story every single night for several years. And then at the end of it, I would ring some tiny little wind chimes that I kept in the house. And I would say, and that's the sound of the angels clapping their wings every time there's a lily. And then I would say,
Beautiful.
okay, and now what book do you want to read? But I wanted them to hear it as they developed language skills
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not talented enough to speak another language. But if I was, this would be my language. Surrogacy became my other language. And
Mm-hmm.
I needed them to understand the big words in that language. I never wanted someone else to know more about their origins than they knew. And it
Right.
was simply self serving. That's why I did it that way.
Well, I think actually it may have been self-serving in some ways, but in other ways it allowed them to live their life as they do. And so have they always been comfortable with it?
I honestly would have to ask them that, and I don't know. I was the mother, and I was kind of running the show. I mean, they were certainly exposed to it. I did lots of documentaries, and they were part of it. And I
Yeah.
always let my children do their own interviews. I mean,
Yeah.
Chase would be negotiating with the Japanese stuff. It'll be Pokemon cards or electronics, and then I will speak to you. But I let them do their own interview because it was their story.
Yeah, and they tell their story beautifully. I've listened to both of them, and we had the great opportunity of talking to Chase, and he insists you tell the child from the day they're born, and he had this one line that I just love. Nobody ever asks you how you were conceived, and when the
It's
kids keep saying to their moms, "You don't want me," I know I was always wanted. That was a clear, clear message from your
Well,
son.
I always would start with telling them that everyone comes from the exact same place in the world, a sperm and an egg,
Hmm.
because it's true.
It is true.
And I wanted them to feel the normal, not the abnormal, because my
Yeah.
life, my work was abnormal. But I wanted them to be aware of that. But I wanted them to know everyone comes from the exact same place.
Right, right. No, it's an important kind of thing, and it allows them to be confident in who they are. So what it does is it makes them feel more secure. That's an important gift, and also to know that without you, without your intention of having them, they wouldn't be here. So in many ways, without you and your husband deciding at that point in time, there would be no Lily or Chase. There would be
Oh, I've
maybe.
used that mercilessly over the years. You know,
Yeah.
when
So,
they would say, I don't have to do what you say because you're not my real mother anyway.
uh-huh.
I would say, really? You know, let's go back and we would talk about, here's my problem. I can't have you, but here's my solution. And
Right.
you were created in my solution. So you want to retake? We can go back. You get my way or no life. What would you choose? And they would look at me and say, I'll get in the car and do what you say. I said, good, get in the car and do
Yeah.
what I say.
Now, don't you think that's a normal conversation the kids have with their
Of
parents?
course,
It's
they
just
go for
the
any jugular you've got.
they do. And I always try and encourage parents, and it's so important. And that's really, I think, why I have the support group for women after the child is born. So usually men have not wanted to join it. I would be welcome to having a man join it. But it's for after the child is born. How do you still find, comfort and feel secure in your responses to this little one who's going to become a big one when you tell your story? Because I very much believe that it's the parent's comfort in telling the story that allows the child to be comfortable. So you've mentioned a couple times, and we didn't really talk about it, but you were so, I don't know what the right word is to use, taken, impressed, uh, touched by the whole journey. You've devoted your life to working in surrogacy now for at least 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really something. How did you decide that, okay, now I'm going to devote my whole life to helping other women through this?
You know, honestly, like everything else in life, you hit one wall and you need to turn the other way. I was in the film business then, and as much as it had glamour and fun and all of that to the rest of the world, when I first met the people at the Center for Surrogate Parenting, I said, I think I want to work here. And they looked at me and said, we need to wait until you've at least had a child. And it's kind of like, okay, well, I'm ready anytime. So I honestly felt that I had found the place that I fit the best, where my passion to do anything really clicked. I realized this was what I should be doing with my life. And I think anybody who still gets up in the morning and goes to work asks themselves at any time, am I lucky enough to be going to do work that I feel passionate about? And I'm so grateful and lucky to say that I am.
Just the support that you give people through this journey. You were calling it emotional energy. It requires a lot of emotional energy. I think it also requires the ability to recognize when that emotional energy is getting a little depleted and you need somebody to help fill up that tank a bit.
I mean, you mentioned also that Lily and Chase also, met their surrogates and knew who they were and all of that. And I think one thing that you have to keep open in your heart is that this was not just one person making these children exist. There was a big room full of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted them to appreciate that, but I wanted them to understand that both Natalie and Tracy, those surrogates, came forward voluntarily to be a surrogate for someone they had never met yet. And that they didn't want to have another child, and they went back to their own families, which was the way it was supposed to be. But I wanted those two children to appreciate the gift that those families gave to our family so that they would exist.
Right.
It's truly that.
Well, that's a huge gift, and to feel strong enough to be able to do that is remarkable. And I know that you help people through that journey. So Chase had one relationship with his surrogate, and Lily had another. And that's okay that they both have two separate relationships, but know that these people exist. It's amazing. I find you amazing in so many ways. I can't even tell you, Faye, because the way you raise these children and your openness and your receptiveness and your comfort in the process and your decision is remarkable. It really is.
Oh, wow. Mother, I hope you are hearing this. You did a good job.
She did a really and remarkable
Thank you
job
so much.
because your desire to be a parent overrode so much. You had so many challenges along the way, and I don't know if everybody was able to pick up on just how many. It's remarkable what you've just done. Even to allow yourself to be involved with the surrogate, for many women, that's a hard thing to do. Talk about emotional energy, right?
Oh, those women, I wish I could just shake them and say, get over yourself. Don't be jealous. Be grateful. Don't be envious that they were part of your journey. None of this would have continued as surrogacy 40 years ago, 30 years ago, if people like me had not said I did that. If everyone hid in the closet, we would have not gone further with a movement of helping people.
Yeah, so I think that this has shifted a bit with surrogacy, that women are a little bit more comfortable. They're very grateful. I think
I think so.
religion plays into it. There's a
Mm,
lot of countries that don't accept it. There's some states here that don't accept it.
mm,
But it's something that people are, as it's in the media more and people are talking about it more, people are more comfortable with it than they used to be.
sure.
It's the relationship that many people struggle with how involved do we have to be. And when somebody goes to an organization where there's a lot of, you mentioned a psychologist there, where there's a lot of evaluation and a lot of matching of people, it's more likely that you will have the relationships that you want to have than if you go routes where maybe you're not able to have all of that testing go on and all that matching go on.
Absolutely. And I've over the years kind of likened it to comparing a dating website where you know a lot about somebody, except what you don't know is there any chemistry, versus meeting someone in a bar. You know if there's chemistry, you just don't know anything else about them.
Right?
Here, you're going to know a lot more. And I think that's what we all deserve and owe ourselves, is to know as much as we can in anything going forward, no matter
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah, I would agree. And, before we end, I did want to mention just a couple of things because there's so much to talk about with you. But I did want to mention that when I work with people with surrogacy or using a surrogate, many times it's very hard to report the numbers because the doctors don't know, depending on the surrogate. So we want to be sure that the relationship there allows for the intended parent to be introduced to the doctor, to know that they exist, to know that
Mhm.
the child is being born through surrogacy, so that they understand the relationships.
I would put that onus on the intended parents to be aware of their rights and be able to contact the obstetrician after the surrogate has been released from the reproductive endocrinologist and introduce themselves, even on Skype, and pay
Yeah.
the doctor $200 or something for their consult. But to have that doctor say, we are the legal and intended parents, and we're going to be part of this journey. We will hopefully be in the delivery room and see you again. But we never want that first meeting to be in the delivery room
Right,
between the
because
doctor and
because it
the.
is their child. They are
Yes.
the intended parents, and the surrogate is doing this just to bring the child into the world.
Yep. And just to let you know, even though you didn't ask, what most surrogates tell us, what they really came for, the big moment for them, is when they hand that baby to those people.
Hmm.
Here is your child in the delivery room. That is what they came for. And it
Yes.
is that moment. And there are agencies where the surrogate never meets the people, and that is such a crime to me. So don't ever work in an agency where a surrogate doesn't meet the intended parents.
Why is that a crime? Maybe we could just.
To me, it's a crime because it, first of all, disrespects the entire procedure that this woman has done for you. But secondly, it takes away from the surrogate what she needs to complete her emotional journey. She needs to see you as the parents with that baby. That's what she needs to see.
Okay.
And without that, her journey is not really completed.
It
And
isn't.
there could be problems.
And it's the beginning of your story and your journey. So it's
Yes.
a beautiful
Yes.
transition. Well, Faye, thank you so much for being on today.
So,
I think this is a wealth of information for people to take in because we touched on so many different things.
well, I'll come back anytime.
Okay, that would be
All
great.
right.
And is there, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, is there a way they can contact you?
Oh, I'm Center for Surrogate Parenting, which is www.creatingfamilies.com, IES on the end of families. And I am Fay at creatingfamilies.com.
Thank you, Fay. If anybody has any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to me at lorimetz.net.